Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about the distributive property. We started it a little bit yesterday with the activity. The activity yesterday was to show you that while we can follow order of operations to add two terms inside of parentheses and then multiply is correct, but when we add in those variables, which we saw in our homework, that there is a different way to write that expression while still showing the multiplication. So the distributive property states that when a value is multiplied by a sum or difference, so addition or subtraction, you can multiply each part by the outside factor. So yesterday we looked at it with numbers. So I'll show another example with numbers here. So I'll use one from yesterday. So we had 2 times 3 plus 4. And we could write it as 2 times 3 plus 2 times 4. That was one of the ones that we looked in our examples yesterday. Then in your homework, I had you try some that had variables attached to them. So in your homework, the one that we saw was 4 times x plus 10. We could write that as 4 times x plus 4 times 10. I can also show this completely with variables. So if I did a times b plus c, this would be the same as a times b plus a times c. And again, it's just that first number is repeated in my multiplication. So I'm distributing the number on the outside to the terms on the inside. So first we're going to show it with some numbers here. When I'm doing it with numbers, the first thing I want to do is I want to break down the second number. So the first number is the number that I'm going to multiply by, and then I want to break down the second number into two simple parts when I'm looking at just numbers. So in this case, I'm going to do 8 times 3 plus 8 times 1/2. And then I can do 8 times 3 is 24. And then I can do 8 times 1/2 is 4. And then I can add and get 28. So instead of multiplying 8 times 3.5 and having to deal with the mixed number, I can do 8 times 3 and 8 times 1/2 and then add them together. So for number 2, I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to do 12 times 12 plus 12 times 1/4. 12 times 12 is 144. 12 times 1/4 is 3. And when I add them together, I get 147. Now for number 3, there are a couple different ways that you can split the number. When we're looking at 78, there's a bunch of different ways that we can add up to 78. So what I did is I did 4 times 70 and 4 times 8. That's where my brain goes to. How can I make this into something simple? Well, I can just say 70 and 8 is 78. So 4 times 70 is going to be 280. 4 times 8 is 32. And then I get 312. Okay, so that's how we use the distributive property with numbers. So now I'm going to show the same type of example but I'm going to use expressions that have variables in them instead. So that's going to be example 2. So for example 2, I'm going to show that I'm multiplying 2 times x plus 2 times 3. So I'm showing each part. Now when we're multiplying a number and a variable together, if I don't know the value of that variable, I'm going to leave it as 2x, and then 2 times 3 is 6. And this is as simple as this expression can get. We cannot combine the variable term with the constant. So the next one, I have 8 times 2x and then 8 times 3. So 8 times 2x and 8 times 3. Now in this one, I can multiply these two numbers together. I'm just going to make sure I keep an x on the end of my term. So 8 times 2 is 16x, and then 8 times 3 is 24. Now you'll notice that I'm drawing these arrows every single time. Those arrows are to remind me to multiply each of the terms by that number. So the next one is going to be 5 times x plus 5 times 9. Now just like number 1, a number times a variable, I'm just going to write them together because I don't know what that variable is. And then 5 times 9 is 45. Number 4 is very similar to number 2. So 3 times 5x plus 3 times 4. I'm going to multiply 3 times 5, and then I'm going to keep the x the same. So 15x plus 12. For number 5, 7 times 3x plus 7 times 9 is going to be 21x if I multiply the numbers in front of the variables, plus 63. Number 6, I'm going to distribute. So 10 times 2x minus, this time, 10 times 5. So now instead of an addition symbol, I've got a subtraction symbol in the middle, so I have to keep that operation sign the same. So 10 times 2 is 20x, and then it's going to be minus 50 instead of plus 50. Okay, so if that sign in the middle is a minus sign, it needs to stay a minus sign. You cannot change it. So this one, 8 times x, and then 8 times 4. So I have 8 times x minus 8 times 4. 8 times x is going to stay in 8x since we don't know what x is, and then minus 32. The last one, 6 times x and 6 plus 2. So I've got 6 times x plus 6 times 2. So I have 6x plus 12. Okay, so this is using the distributive property now with variable expressions. Now in the next example, we're going to talk about whether or not you should distribute. So what does it look like when you're supposed to distribute versus what does it look like when you're not supposed to distribute? Now remember, with the distributive property, we have a number outside of our parentheses that is being multiplied. So in all of the examples that I did in number 2, the multiplication was not explicit. So there was no multiplication symbol. You had a number directly next to parentheses, which is most often how you're going to see your distributive property. You can also show it with the dot next to it, but there needs to be something times a quantity in parentheses that is being added or subtracted. So in number 10 here, I don't know why it starts at number 10, but in number 10 here, it says 7 plus x plus 6. Here I would not distribute. Okay, and I'm not going to distribute because the 7 is being added to the expression in the parentheses, not multiplied. Okay, in number 11, we have the multiplication symbol in between the parentheses and the number, but inside the parentheses, those are also being multiplied. So I'm not going to distribute here either. Because the expression inside the parentheses is multiplied and not added or subtracted. For number 12, I am not going to distribute. There's no expression inside parentheses. So I could set up 4 times 5 as the distributive property, but that additional 2 is not going to do anything. I'm missing the parentheses around the 5 plus 2. This last one, I am going to distribute. Because 4 is multiplied by x minus 8. So there's a number that's being multiplied by a quantity that is added or subtracted inside the parentheses. Okay, so this is recognizing when you're supposed to use the distributive property, because we get in this habit of, okay, she's asked me to distribute over and over and over again, but then we forget that there are times that we're not going to do that because we get in such a habit of practicing this skill. So we broke it down with numbers, very similar to the examples that we did yesterday in the activity. Then I showed you how it worked with those variables, which is very similar to what it looked like on your homework that kind of matched up with that activity. And then we talked about when we should not distribute or use the distributive property. So today you're going to practice doing the distributive property more with these variable expressions. And then we are going to talk about factoring tomorrow. Please come see me if you have any questions, and good luck.